Hey, welcome to the Kingdoms Podcast. My name is Luke and I host this with my buddy Matt Ma. And our goal is to empower you to discover how your faith impacts culture for God's kingdom. To do that, we're sitting down with different men and women from all kinds of disciplines to uncover how they, through their ambitions and vocational skill set, make a difference in the lives of those around them. And so if this is helpful to you, we'd love it if you could like it, share it, and subscribe. In the meantime, enjoy today's episode. Well, friends, thank you for jumping on the podcast today. I'm really thankful to have with me a friend, a pastor, a guy with phenomenal hair, Aaron Johnson. Aaron, thanks for jumping on with me, man.
Hey, happy to be here, man.
Dude, 100%. Well, if you don't know Aaron, he's a pastor, he's a church planter. And Aaron, I'm trying to think, winter of 2020, you were scheduled to speak at a youth retreat that I was leading. There was like a crazy blizzard that you drove through to get to my city. The buses transporting our youth group said, "We can't drive tonight. We'll drive you tomorrow morning." And so I think you were like halfway there and I just called you and I was like, "You want to have a sleepover?" You remember that?
Lord put a snowplow right in front of me all the way to Barrie, man. Let's go.
Dude, it was good. Well, it was fun because I'm grateful because it's one of those things where I know for a lot of people listening, if they host those sort of things, they don't always get quality time with a speaker they're bringing in. And you and I had like supper together and like a whole evening, like just to hang out before going and hanging out for a retreat. So
that was pretty good. And that was like one of the last events kind of before like the whole country shut down too, man. It was like, whoa.
Yes. And the weekend itself, it was like, I feel like it was minus 20 that Saturday night.
Dude, it was incredible, man. We were playing like ice hockey on the lake up north. Like you never feel more Canadian than when you're playing hockey on a
bonfire, hot chocolate, all the things. Anyways, the things that make Canadian pastors bond: hockey, frigid temperatures, and too much snow. But sorry, that just popped in my mind, man. So I was like, I gotta bring this up. It's a good memory with you. But I'm really grateful for you because, Aaron, a few things. One, your testimony has always been like, wow, to me. Two, just the faith that you emanate and your courage and leadership is something that really inspires me. And so for people like listening in, my heartbeat in wanting to invite you on was to walk through some of those things, your testimony, your leadership, what God has done in your life and through your life, and stepping out in faith to plant the church that you're currently leading. So for people who are like, man, we don't know Aaron Johnson, but we'd love to hear his story. I'd love to kind of rewind things a little bit and go back a few years.
Man, if they don't know me, praise the Lord. I'm not trying to have my name in lights. I'm not trying to author no book, man. I'm happy to be in the little village of Hensel in the middle of nowhere in obscurity. It's my little Nazareth, man, where I can live tied Jesus, dude. And I love that.
Yeah, me too, man. Well, if someone had told you when you were 19 years old that 1, you'd be loving Jesus, 2, you'd be a pastor, and 3, you would be planting a church, what would you have said to them as a 19-year-old?
Yeah, I don't know if 19-year-old Aaron would have been coherent enough to even understand or respond to such a question, man. It was not like, honestly, like that period of my life, man. Holy, like I was angry at God and running from God and way lost in my sin and very aware of it too. Like I grew up with a mom and dad, loved Jesus, taught me the gospel since I was a kid, grew up in a good church. And really, honestly, accepted Christ when I was young, baptized when I was young. But man, I lost my best friend when I was 15. It's the first thing that really shook my faith in God. First time it was like, oh, things aren't going well. What is this? And I really didn't know how to cope and deal with it, man. And so that at a young age or like in the end of my high school and into college, university, young adulthood, man, like I was honestly angry at God and living in such a way to like get back at him. Like, I'm going to sin intentionally, God, to like take this. You're going to do this to me. Well, watch what I do with my life. Wow. And yet always, man, in like the deepest recesses of my heart, still knew that what I was doing was wrong. Still knew that he was there and that I was just running from the truth. And so, 19-year-old me would have thought this is that's a pipe dream. And yet at the same time, I don't know, man, like even from a young age, this may be weird, but even from a young age sitting in church, man, I always had this sense of like like looking at the pastor, listening to sermons and just being like, I feel like I could do that someday, or I want to do that someday, not really understanding what it was, but just sensing that call even from a young age.
Wow. Can I ask, that's like, I never knew that part of your story, Aaron, of losing your best friend. And like, there's a pretty significant element of grief there. What was it like to look at that grief in the face at some point and in a way, move past it? Because obviously it sounds like part of your response to God, it just came from that place of like I'm really hurting. And I think I would have been like you if I had been your age. It's like, I don't know how to understand a God who is a comforter in this moment when he's allowed something so tragic to happen. How did you walk through that grief?
Yeah, I mean, it took years, dude, years to process, like, because I put it all inside. I wouldn't talk about it. I couldn't even mention his name. I didn't want, if anybody brought it up, I just changed the subject. Didn't even want to talk about it, that type of thing. Right. And so it took years, but then also took years to realize like my own selfish view of the world. Right. Like it was such a very self-centered me. God, look what you're doing. Like it took that whole situation, which involved his family, his life, so many other factors. Right. But I made it all about me and how I was processing it, man. And it was hard. It took a long time, but a lot of grace, man, a lot of grace and a lot of good wisdom and mentoring from godly people that came into my life and would help bear that out over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it makes me think of the reality that we can't underestimate the ways in which the people in our lives who maybe seem distant or rebellious or opposed to faith, how much is going on, like how much complexity there might be in their past. And I wonder, just for somebody listening, whether it's somebody who's saying, I've had an experience of unexpected loss that has really made it hard to trust God, or someone who's, an older sibling or parent of or youth leader of somebody who has gone through tragic loss as a child or a youth and is angry at God. What would your word of wisdom to them be, given your own experience?
I keep going, man. Like keep speaking in their life. Stay compassionate, stay patient, and embrace the hurt, right? Like I had so many good people in my life, and yet I treated them like trash during those moments. Like and I set those barriers and those distances, and yet they kept pursuing me, just the way that God kept pursuing me. That God could see when I was Simon before I was Peter, right? Like he has this amazing ability of also seeing the future, seeing who we can become. Comes in these moments, has incredible compassion and grace, right? And that was certainly the case for me. So, and I had spent years working with youth, and so I would just tell parents like don't give up, stay patient. It's a unique season. Maybe it's the first time they're dealing with this grief, or first time they're dealing with doubt. Right. Journey with them through that, and have thick enough skin that doesn't take all their hate personally, but can see that maybe the anger that they have towards you or towards God is like because of something else. So try to search for what that deeper thing is. I was certainly, I was living a certain way. Like if you saw my actions, my speech, all that sort of stuff, you would have thought I was the furthest thing from a believer. And yet internally I was wrestling with all these things. Right. So it would have taken somebody to kind of wade into that and really be patient with me and bear that out to understand, okay, cool. He's just wrestling with something and there's hope here.
Yeah. I remember speaking to somebody who had the experience of seeing like a dog that kind of got sideswiped by a car, and like the dog's leg was injured. It was on the side of the road, but it was in good enough shape that it was probably going to survive. But they pulled over, they got out of their car, they're like going over to try and see if this dog's okay. And the dog was like snarling at him and like trying to bite him and like not letting them come close. And they just realized like this animal's in so much pain right now that they're not able to differentiate between, friend or foe. Am I someone that's going to increase their pain because they just got hurt really badly? Or am I someone that's actually going to care for them? And they just said, people sometimes respond a lot like that. They're hurting and it's not always clear to them in their pain who's actually coming alongside, not to hurt.
It's beautiful, man. You just pull that out of nowhere. Like man, I'm such like a visual learner and like metaphors and stories. I was fire.
I heard a pastor say that one time. It's not original to me. So, but it helped.
Nothing is, man. Nothing is. The smart people are just the best at hiding their sources.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, well, it helped me. And I wonder for you. So Aaron, you experienced that at 15, grade 9 or 10, right in the middle of high school. And you're bearing this pain, you're running from God, you're struggling to understand God's purposes in the light of loss. But you do reach a point of change, a point of surrendering your life to Christ, a point of stepping on board and being captivated by his vision for his kingdom, for life in step with Jesus. And so was that for you, was that like an explicit moment where you were like, this has got to change? Or was it really like a season, like over the course of a year where God was just softening and reshaping your heart? What did that change look like in your
It
life?
was both, man. I think it's always it's a slow process of coming back to understanding. There's certainly defining moments where I was just like, yeah, honestly, I remember one night, like I'd party, smoke, drink, all that sort of stuff, but only ever did it just party. And there's one time where I was like, I was just so depressed and whatever. And I smoked up and went to work. It's the first time I've ever done that. And I remember somebody came and visited me, an old friend, a Christian friend. And I was like very aware and embarrassed and was like trying to hide it. And I remember just sitting there and this person said to me, she just said, "What's wrong with you?" Like just like that, man. And those words, like just they just sunk down deep, man. And I was like ashamed. I was embarrassed because I knew, man. I knew, like I knew where I was. I knew that I was in the pit and that I can't keep living this way. I needed change. But those words just resonated. What's wrong with you? And it really got me thinking, like, yeah, what is wrong with me? It was the genesis of like something needs to change. But before that, man, like again, I was telling you, because I'd always wrestle with like, am I truly a believer? Am I saved? Like, look at all this sin that I'm doing. What gave me hope was that like even in the worst stuff that I was doing, I truly knew that what I was doing was wrong. And I really believed that I had the Spirit still convicting me of that. And I always kind of knew in my head, like, I'm never going to go like crazy far with this. Like I'm going to marry a godly woman, or I'm not going to bring kids in the world and then maybe have them raised up in a home where they don't know or learn about Jesus. Like that thought to me was like an impossibility.
Mm.
What was interesting in my own journey, man, is so I went on this journey to try to disprove God.
Okay.
Like, right. Like I was so angry at him that I was like, okay, I'm going to disprove God then. Like maybe I was just brainwashed. Maybe all this stuff I was taught in church and from parents, right? Maybe like, and so I was like so mad. I was like, I wanted, so I went, man, and I searched and I researched like every other world religion and then all the science, atheism, all that sort of stuff. And man, dude, it like God has a sense of humor, but like the more I waded into all of that, the more I could see the truth of the gospel. Like the more I, like, as I really researched and studied, the more I could see like, this doesn't make sense. This is empty. And the more it actually served to like solidify that, like, oh no, actually what I've always believed is actually the truth. So fast forward to like basically I was just like, man, like, godly people speaking to my life. Hey, you need to go. I needed to be completely out of that environment. I actually applied to Bible school, got accepted. It was like I was living this lifestyle, and basically the next day just off to school where I didn't know a single person. And I still remember my first Bible course, like Old Testament theology, Old Testament 101, whatever it was. And dude just opens the Bible, just starts Genesis 1, just going, man. And like literally my jaw was like just dropped. And I was like, and I knew in that moment, I'm like, this is what God has made me for. This is what he made me for. And I was at that moment, then I was all in, because I was like, I had all my revelry out of me. And I was like, Lord, like you don't have 50% of me, you have 100% of me. Like I'm all in. And graduated 3 years, and God blessed me to be able to be in ministry right out of school, and been rocking it ever since.
Wow. What was that school? And did you meet Holly, your wife, there?
No, like Holly and I met like while we were both kind of in this journey of like lost in sin, but searching, knowing we want to change. We're both kind of Christians, kind of love God, kind of go to church, but just don't know what life is like. So like I basically met my God brings what you need when you're not even looking for it. He knows what you need, right? And so like 6 months before I go off to Bible school, like me and Holly started dating. We fell in love. And that was basically like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm going off to the States. Baptist Bible College is where I went to school. And anyway, but I'm not American. And the more time I spent there, the more I wanted to be here in Canada. Love it. And anyway, so yeah, God brought us in, and we did long distance for 2 years, but then she was able to come, took a year of Bible school in my final year. So we got a year of school together because we knew we were going into ministry, got married, and yeah.
That's beautiful. So you dive right into ministry. You're what, 22, 23?
Yeah, pretty much, man. Like I graduated, took 1 week off, and started full-time pastoring in Mississauga.
Yeah. And dude, leadership is it's a privilege, but it's a messy privilege. Like it's hard. There's curveballs. You have moments where you're like, wow, it's magnificent what God has done in this person's life. And you have moments where you're like, I cannot compute how it's possible that you can see life the way you see life. Like it's challenging. And we have our own shortcomings where we're like, man, I've got to grow in this area or change in this regard, or I didn't treat that person well. Right. It's a messy journey. And so for you, when you look back to where you started and some of the transitions along the way and some of the really like hard things, what would you say was the source of that like courage, that faith to like keep going, especially when things were really complicated and really hard?
Mm. Dude, man, like the scriptures are true that our strength is in the Lord. Um, it's like you can't even explain it, man. It's like a supernatural strength and confidence that I think only comes from Him. Like, dude, those first 2 years in ministry, like it's so true. Like I wanted to quit multiple times because all of a sudden, like all of a sudden you're behind the curtain, right? Like you see everything with rose-colored glasses when you're just sitting in church on a Sunday morning, and that's the only your experience. And then you start getting into the nitty-gritty of ministry, which is getting in the nitty-gritty of life with people, man, who are just broken and messy, right? And internal church politics and all this whatever stuff that is just like, whoa, I didn't realize this is what all comes with it, man. I just want to disciple and lead people to Jesus, right? So all of that extra stuff, it still weighs on me. It's not, none of that stuff brings joy, and I don't love it, but it's all part of leadership. And I don't know, man. I don't know. Like God has preserved me through this. He's given me that beautiful perseverance that Paul, whenever you're reading through the New Testament, and he's praying for other people, he's not praying that things would go away or praying that you get out of that difficult situation. He keeps telling, like, I'm praying for perseverance. I'm praying for strength. And I know in my own journey, I've had people constantly praying for me and praying for our ministry. And it's been God alone that has kept me in this. In my own strength, I would have quit multiple times. Been like, no way, I don't want this. Especially when I was second chair leader like my whole life. And I love being the second chair because, you know, the lead guy could get beat up and everybody could be mad at him. And I could help him, encourage him, pray for him, but then I'm just free to go and keep doing on ministry, right? And I always even had that hesitation of like, man, I don't know if I want that role or that chair. And do I really want to put myself and my family through all that side of it? So for me, my strength comes like, but if God is in it, and God is going with me, then I'm good and I can do it. Yeah. And if He is willing to embrace the shame and the humiliation that comes along with humility, a part of humility is willing to be humiliated. And He did that naked and ashamed on the cross on our behalf. Like if He can do that for us, so the source of strength is the gospel, right? Then I'm willing to embrace it for Him, but I'm not going to go if I don't know that He's in it with me.
Yeah.
But if He's in it, man, if His hand is there, then I'm like, okay, Lord. And I've always felt reluctant in my leadership, like very much like a Moses, like, God, there's somebody better, somebody more talented, smarter, whatever, right? Use them, Lord. And yet He said, no, I want you. And so I've kind of felt, even with this whole church planting journey, like I knew it was coming, and I can't not say no. I cannot say no, because I know how good God is. I know what He can do in and through me. And so I'm going to lay it down and say, okay, Lord, let's do it. Let's do it together.
Yeah. So let's zero in on that, because can you walk us through that journey? You're laying down, you've been at Emmanuel Baptist Church in Exeter for what? How many years before the start of the church plant?
About 8 years, probably, before we started kind of going into it. And then,
Yeah. So 8 years, great community, big trust bank, good relationship with the lead pastor. Like you got a good gig, right?
Good gig, man.
You could coast.
I didn't want to change.
But you're stepping into that process of laying down, safety, comfort, familiarity in your role in that community, and being under like in a way that the covering, if you will, of a lead pastor. Like you said, that place where like if something goes sideways, like really sideways, the buck stops with this dude, like not me. Right. So you're laying all that down to say, okay, we're going to plant a church. And when you say yes to planting a church, there's a lot of ambiguity with that. Who's going to come? Where are we going to meet? Maybe even like what city or town are we going to get plugged into? Are we going to move? What's this going to mean for my kids' schooling? There's so much up in the air. So can you walk us through that process of first sensing like, I think God's calling me to a change, and how God guided you through that? Because some of the people listening are in a place where they're like, I think God is challenging me not to coast where I am, challenging me to be ready to lay down the safety and comfort and familiarity to follow Him. So how did God lead you through that process?
Yeah, man. I mean, it through a lot of tears and trepidation and hesitation, but faith, right? Like I was, like you said, I love my church. I love my role. I didn't want to change, right? But then there's these little things that God just got it always, with me, it's always started with a change of desire. I could just sense that my desires were changing. Not that I wanted to do anything new. The mission for Jesus never changes, but I just sensed like an internal role, like what I'd been doing, pastoring and youth ministry and those various things. I just sensed a change in my desire of where God would do this. And as soon as that happens, that just scares me. Because like you said, yeah, it's different when you're young and single and you're on your own. Okay, your decisions just affect you. But now I got a wife and we're one flesh, man. I can't make those decisions alone. And I got girls who are, I didn't want to be that pastor dude that's like moving around every 2 years and wrecking my kids' lives, right? Where they don't love Jesus or the church or any of that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, all that stuff is kind of going through your mind. Plus, yeah, you get a point. I was many years along where it's like, this is comfortable, man. I got a salary. I got a reputation. Things are fine. Do I want to step into something that's at risk, but it's also like, it needed to be done, man. It needed to be done. I needed something that would challenge my faith and allow me to trust the Lord and to step out and do this thing. I was scared and reluctant at first, because mainly just because of, not because like I knew God was in it, but just taking on that mantle of leadership and being the dude. Yeah, so it started with just an internal change of desires, man. And then for anybody listening though, like discerning God's call for your life should never be done in isolation, right? Like it's always done in community. Like we are part of a body. And so I'll just tell you, for my own calling into church planting, like it actually started with other people. It didn't even start with me. Like our church had a desire to like get back to outreach and be in our community, right? And then that went to our elders, and our elders were praying and discerning what would that actually look like. And they came to say, like, I think the best way of doing outreach within this greater community would be to plant a church. Still at this point, and I'm praying with them and I'm agreeing with them as an elder, but I'm just like, that's not me. I don't want to do that. Let's raise up somebody else. And God had been actually putting that hard on like this other couple who's now an elder with me, and him and his wife in our church, who live in this area. And he basically like knows everybody in town. The dude is incredible. Snyder, you know who he is.
Yeah.
God had put that desire on his heart like 2 years before it ever was on my heart. But then those internal desires started changing. So then I just started asking questions and taking little pursuits. Took a church planting course, and God was just like pressing and pressing. I'm like, oh no, this is happening. Then I remember I had a conversation with Soto from the fellowship. He came down and I was like in tears, man, because as soon as he started talking, I'm like, oh no, I'm like, it was just affirming, and what he was saying. I'm like, yep, God is definitely calling me to this. And then I'm like literally in tears, because I'm just like, I don't know what this is going to mean for our future, but God, I know you're in it. And so I'm going to go, I'm going to obey, and I'm going to rock it. When I sat down, I remember our first elders meeting, I literally like I said, okay, guys, I think God is putting this call, but I'm not sure. I want to hear from each and every single one of you. Hey, do you think I can even do this? Do you think God is calling me to this, calling us to this, blah, blah. Went around the room. Every man spoke into it. It was beautiful. And then at the end of the meeting, like literally we pray, the meeting ends. I look over, and my buddy Aaron, who I mentioned, is looking me right in the eye. And he just goes, I'm in. Just like that, man, I'm in. And I'm like, what? Like there was no details, no plans, no nothing, just a sense of this calling. But then right away to have this godly man say like, I'm in, I want on board with this. So there's all these like little affirmations through other godly people around, like from wife to family to mentors to all that sort of stuff that we're feeding in. So again, you discern that calling of God in community, I believe, and that just gives you confidence. Okay, cool. This is way beyond me, and God is doing something here. And so then cool, I can wade into that in confidence.
And yeah, discerning in community and having community that says, yeah, let's go. I'm in. Let's make this happen. So you're preparing to launch a church, plant a church. You've got the blessing of your home church, Emmanuel Baptist Church in Exeter. You've got the blessing of, the fellowship you're a part of, like them saying, yeah, let's make this happen. And you're kind of pounding the pavement in terms of saying like, okay, where do we go and where do we meet? And so we've talked about this, pre-interview, but I love the story of God kind of dropping a church in your lap. And I don't want to say too much more than that, but what did it look like for you to say, hey, really to realize that God was going before you to provide a place for you to gather to worship in Hensel, where you ended up planting?
Yeah.
Can you share that?
That's cool. I'm glad you say that, because that's another piece of just discerning that call for me, right? Like, yeah, I went through an assessment, I went through a greenhouse, went through all these things where people could not only just like evaluate character, but also competency, right? Because I think everybody should be serving within their own calling, right? Like God has given each one of us unique giftings, abilities, a story, and he's just given us different roles. Not one is any greater in the kingdom, man. They're just different roles. And so I just wanted to be where I was actually, called to be and capable of doing it. But then, yeah, God also to see the way that he would provide and just like, okay, that's not normal. That's clearly God providing. Also gives affirmation that, yeah, this may be where we should go. And also what I do have a bit of that entrepreneurial to me. Like I do love starting things from scratch. I didn't want to walk into something that was already established and try to change the culture that's been there for 50 years. I like starting from ground zero and setting a vision and building a culture and training up leaders right from scratch. So that was a part of it. I also love the idea of like when you plant, man, there's so much like you go and then you learn as you go and you discover as you go and you figure out things as you go. And I think people need to hear that too, because we're so hesitant to like everything all the ducks have to be in a row before I then go and obey God. But he's waiting to see for you to go. And then as you go, he reveals all these things along the way, which has been so true for us and so beautiful. So there's a flexibility, right? Like you set your plans and your goals and your dreams, but then you're also flexible day to day to say, okay, God, now you direct, and then you kind of go with the flow as you're going. All that to say, okay, so yeah, we're looking for a spot. Like we really felt, so we're close to Grand Bend, like the shores of the Lake Huron, and I'm like, my happy place is the beach. That's where I go to Sabbath and get restored. And so like, there's Grand Bend is right on the beach. It's 20 minutes from where we are. So I felt like obviously that's where God wants me. He needs me close to the beach so I can preach at their feet. And that's where we were targeting, man. And we also have people there who like there was a need there for sure, and we felt like that's where we were. But anyway, as we going through these conversations and just in prayer and conversations together, like Aaron, the guy I mentioned, with his family and another family who was coming on our team, they both lived in Little Hensel. And we're like, wow, actually, there's more people there. And we never really considered it because like in our area, Hensel is kind of, it's just not like the most popular place to live. It might be like a low income or like where you'd buy your first house. But a lot of people are like, I hope I can get out of here someday. And so we hadn't even really considered it. But again, we go where God wants us to go. So we walked in this community and we're basically just looking for a space. So again, we weren't even planning to start with a Sunday morning service, but then came around to like, yeah, but people were actually asking for that. And, yeah, we don't need a space at first, but then it's like, oh yeah, no, actually we do need a space together. There's a lot of us, whatever. And so we're trying to find a space. And as anybody in that world knows, it's just not easy to find a space available. There wasn't really, seemed like nothing was happening in Grand Bend. There wasn't any options there. So we started looking here in Hensel. And so there's this old building on the main street, and it was an old grocery store, completely empty, but a big space. I was like, oh man, it's been sitting there empty for years. What if we bought that, renovated it? It's right on the main street. It could be an awesome spot. I have no idea who owns this space. Nobody really in town knew. So I walked into the pharmacy, which is next to the space, and just talked to the pharmacist there and say, hey, just wondering about that building across the road. Do you know who owns it? Because I'd like to talk to them. And he had no idea. And he kind of knows everybody. He's like, I don't know who owns it, but why? What are you looking for a space for? I said, well, we're thinking about starting a new church in this area, and we're just looking for a space to gather on Sunday mornings. And this guy's eyeballs about pop out of his head. Okay. And then he proceeds to tell me that he has a church, like he owns a church building, and he's been praying for like 3 years for a faith community to come and use that space to actually teach the Bible. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? So the backstory to that is this is actually a Catholic gentleman who lives in London, but his pharmacy is here in Hensel. He's there 6 days a week, loves this small town. There was a couple other churches in town, but they all closed down and those buildings were sold off. And so this old United Church building, their church also kind of like, we're selling the building. And so he actually like literally went and bought the building of his own money because he couldn't imagine his little town of Hensel not having a church or not at least having a faith community. Right. So incredible. So this guy buys it. And then he has this vision of like, he wanted to have some Catholic services there, let the United Church still meet there, but also a space where other faith communities could come and meet and gather and use the space to actually teach the Bible and teach the good news. He tried doing some of his own stuff for a year, and they just found it was really hard. And then COVID hit, and then basically the building sat empty for like 2 more years after that. So 3 years have gone by. I would say he kind of had like the death of a vision where he probably thought for the first time, maybe I should just move on for this. I really felt like this was from God, but nothing is happening. And then here I walk in asking him if he has a building where we can start a church. And God married those two things together, right? Like he had been preparing that behind the scenes for like 3 years, long before that was ever even a desire on any of our hearts. And God had preserved that for us. And so now, man, dude, we're paying like $1,000 a month of rent. I got my office that you're seeing here right now in this building. We have unlimited use of it. And it's like centrally located right in our area, because not everybody that comes from Hensel, but they're coming from Grand Bend and Bayfield and all these small towns around the area. And it's right centrally located for us to meet. And it's been an absolute gift from God.
Man, absolutely. And it's like you said, you get in motion and you see God starting to, for lack of a better term, put those ducks in a row. Once you take that step out, those things start to.
Oh man, and now that we're here, right? Again, we couldn't see it then, but now that we're here, we can look back and be like, oh man, like look how God did that, and look how God did that, and look how He brought this, and it's just all these little things that once we stepped out and started doing it, man, He started providing, like financially and physically with the building and people, and then people's hearts, man, like people are literally, you can tell that their hearts have been prepared by the Lord well in advance.
Yeah.
That when we stepped out in faith and started this ministry, God had already been working, and He just brought us together, that what we were doing just matches what they need in this moment. It's been beautiful.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And just sweet. One more example of just being like, wow, yeah, like, it's super cliche, but where God guides, God provides, like that God knows what He's up to. And He just invites us into the adventure, really, of saying like, man, what might God do if we step out and say yes in this?
Dude, I had a guy like he literally just walked. He was trying to find a different church. Him and his and he ended up coming in our church thinking that was the church that he was looking for, but it wasn't. And then absolutely fell in love with our church. And he's like, hey, let's chat, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, let's grab coffee this week. He comes in that week, he sits on the couch, and this is literally the first words out of his mouth. He's like, I want you to tell me how to be saved. And I literally started looking around for like the camera. I'm like, am I being punked right now? Like, what is happening? I'm just like laughing, like stop it, dude. What are you talking about? But that's like legit. Like he's at that place on his journey. Wow. He was ready to be told, like, I want to be saved, and we're journeying with him. He's getting baptized this summer. It's going to be incredible. This is like a verse that was impactful for me and for our team as we ventured out on this. It comes from Acts 18. This is where like Paul was traveling around it, and I better just read it because I'm bad at memorizing. I would have failed the legalism holiness test, but Acts 18 verse 8, and the Lord said to Paul one night in a vision, do not be afraid, right? But go on speaking and do not be silent. So again, this is speaking right to my heart, because I had trepidation. I was hesitant, right? But the Lord was saying to me, don't be afraid. Go on speaking. Do not be silent, for I am with you. Like this is Jesus talking directly to him. And it's just that reminder of His presence, right? And that's where my confidence comes from, knowing that I'm not alone in this, but I am with you. I will be with you even to the end of the age. And then He says, no one will attack you or harm you. And then Jesus says, for I have many in this city who are my people.
Yeah.
I have many in this city who are my people, man. And dude, we were able to look at Hensel and look at our area and just be like, okay, God's people are there. Jesus already has people there that the Father's been drawing and working on their hearts. And if we step out in faith and start doing this, He just brings those two things together. And it's been awesome.
Yeah. So you've launched this church plant. People are coming. God's provided a building. People are ready to embrace the gospel and be changed. There's so many awesome elements. And so I wonder, you already touched on this with the story of that guy that came in wanting to just say, hey, how can I be saved? But what have been some of the biggest joys for you in this venture? But what would you also say have been like the really most like difficult challenges? Because as you said, like planting a church is not easy, and Satan hates your guts, and people are people. So what have been like, wow, this is beautiful, and like, wow, this is hard.
Yeah, man, there's been both, man. People would laugh because they're like, this is going to be the greatest thing you'll ever do and the hardest thing you ever do. And it's so true in both senses. But there's no glory, man, if everything's easy and comfortable.
Yeah.
There's more glory in the hard work, right? In the perseverance. And that's, dude, the joys, man, like genuine life transformation, like true healing in people, like souls being changed, like saved, baptized, growing, stepping into leadership, like everything that we had actually prayed for and hoped for. Like, we're not trying to just do the thing, right? We're not trying to just play the game and just do the thing and muscle through it and hopefully something happens. Like like what we had prayed into and what we had hoped for and what we had dreamed is actually what is coming to fruition. Like God is honoring not me, but like our team, that we together as like stepped out in faith and are doing this. And the greatest joy, it's been so cool, man. One of the honestly, like the greatest joy for me has been watching my team succeed. You know what I mean? Like when I was a younger man, it was like, yo, let me show you what I can do. And there's a little bit of that, like I want the pulpit and I want the limelight, and I'm the one that's going to change the world kind of deal. And man, all of that, like God has this beautiful way of working all of that out of you. like just stripping you bare. I think there is something to be said about, yeah, you shouldn't be the lead pastor until you're well into your 30s, man. You've had enough hits to be humbled, right? But like I honestly have such joy in like watching my team stepping out in faith. They're actually doing it and then actually seeing the fruit come through in their lives. It's just been so beautiful. Got a young guy that, like, you know, he started in junior high when I was at the church, and he came and he's now a leader here, and he's like leading our worship. He's leading young adults. And I even had like this moment where it's like it was very like he did something and everybody was loving on him, and I was like excited for him too. And then I realized like, oh, I'm not like the young cool guy anymore. I'm just like the old dude. He's the cool young guy that people are drawn to. And there was not an ounce of me that was like, oh, boo, what was me? Like, I was just like, dude, man, look at this kid. Like, he's doing it. And this kid is humble. He loves Jesus, and he just attracts people to him because he's just being who he is in Christ around other people. And it's just like incredible, man. So, and like other guys too, that like came on this journey super scared. And like, I've never had, you know, evangelism totally scared them. Like I've never had it. Like, I don't know how to enter into a spiritual conversation. I don't feel like I know anything. And, you know, we've actually been taking them through Sam Chan's book, How to Talk About Jesus Without Being That Guy. It's such like a practical, hands-on, like tangible way of actually neighboring, interacting with your neighbors. Anyway, had a guy like just last week, you know, he's been going through this with us. He caught this vision of like neighboring, but he never really believed that it could actually happen, right? Like how can I just invite my buddy over to watch the Leafs game, which he did, and how's it going to, and then all of a sudden we just found ourselves talking like really deep stuff, life stuff, like having these deep spiritual conversations. And you could see his heart just like he was just full of joy, because he's like, man, like he is being used of God, and he's experiencing actually being a part of God's kingdom work. And that's now giving him life. And that's like literally our role as pastors, is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. It's not to do it for them. And when you see your people grab that and do it and succeed, man, it's just beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And experience for themselves how sweet it is to be used by God to see people's lives change. That's like, that's huge.
Yeah. And set them apart in their own way. Like a big thing for us is like, man, I'm not trying to make carbon copies of me, because we're all different. We've been given spiritual gifts so that there's diversity among the unity that we have, right? We all have different stories, different passions, and to give people the freedom to like walk into what God has called them to. So we've been very careful not to like create a ministry and then try to fit leaders into it. And you do this thing, but be like, hey, what has God called you to? What are you passionate about? What's your giftings? And then set them free to actually pursue that within the context of like our church and our community. And then to see it actually, like it's actually happening. Like I had an older woman. So we have a kids Sunday school, but we don't have enough volunteers or people to do a youth Sunday school right now. And we had an older woman that, as we're like talking and praying and preaching through these things, she felt convicted from the Spirit that she needs to provide a class for like our tweens, basically, because there was nothing for them. They've been helping out in nursery and volunteering, but they didn't have something for them. And she felt burdened. And then she was also like, she was telling me this, like in tears, also scared, because she's like, I'm older. I don't even know how to connect with them. I don't even know if I can do this. I haven't taught like this way before, but I feel that God is calling me to this. And so she stepped out in faith and she did it, and she's doing it, and she's bearing fruit in it. And it is just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. So for those people, whether it's lay people in the church or people stepping into leadership in the church, who are feeling they're saying, well, I'm young, I don't have experience, or maybe I'm not so young, but I don't know if I'm relevant or can connect. What would you say would be your best advice to people who are on the cusp of saying yes to something God's calling them into, whether it's leading a Sunday morning study for the teenagers or launching a church? Like, what would you say? Hey, this is what you need to know.
Yeah, man, you don't need to be relevant. Like, yeah, it's a good thing to be relevant and to understand the cultural moment for sure. But like people want to be pursued. People want to be noticed. People want to be listened to. People want to be loved, man. And when you give people attention, doesn't matter how young or old, like that that builds trust. It builds relationships. It builds, it affords you the ability to actually speak into their life truth, but then also challenge them to grow. Right. So, I mean, it's relationships, dude. And you don't need to, if you're listening to this and you're wondering about being a leader in the church, you don't have to sit back and wait for somebody to come. Like, there should be guys who should come and tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, let me mentor you and bring you along. But also don't sit there and wait for that. Just start doing it, man. Start doing it and people will absolutely notice. They will see the impact that you're having, right? You don't need somebody to like come and just tell you to do it. You can do it yourself. You can pursue that. And then people will notice over time, right?
Well, and with that, what would you say that our culture is longing for from the church? And what I mean by that is there are realities that are only found in Christ that people are chasing for outside of Christ. And so when you think about the church right now and the future of the church, what would you say, man, this is what we as the church need to be intentional about. This is what people need. This is what they need to see in us. And when they have the opportunity to encounter this reality, that's what leads to new life. Yeah.
Mark Sayers would say they need a non-anxious presence.
Boom.
Which I try to embody. But I honestly, man, I think when I think of like us doing evangelism and actually reaching people who have never been to church, don't own a Bible, or have been hurt by the church, don't really understand God, Jesus, don't really see the need for it, and just kind of see everything as a buffet. Yeah, I can have a bit of that, I have a bit of that, I'll take whatever I want. I think we have the ability to actually show them that Jesus is better. He's better than anything that they're pursuing. But the way that they see that is by you being the presence of Jesus with them. Like, they actually need to experience it like tangibly. And that takes time, man. That takes time. Like evangelism doesn't just happen in one sermon or one message, right? It happens where you're actually doing life with your neighbors. Like you're being the tangible presence of Jesus, where you're just being, it's not a put on, it's not a program, it's actually a posture where you're just living your transformed life in front of somebody else, and they will notice that is different. In fact, when Jesus literally says that is the greatest commandment, it's to love God, but it's also to love your neighbor as yourself, he says. Well, what does that mean? That's not like the modern mantra, love yourself. Like he's literally like as naturally as you love yourself, you should love your neighbor. And the way you love yourself without even thinking about it. You get up in the morning, you're hungry, you go eat, you're sick, you take some medicine, right? You're tired, you go to sleep. You don't think those things, you just do them to care and love for yourself. So as naturally as you do that is as naturally as you should be actually loving your neighbor. Which means, and I believe that means your actual neighbors. It certainly means everybody, even your enemies, but it means your actual neighbors. It means your actual coworkers, the people in your sphere of influence. You have a way of like again, going to them, not waiting for them to come to you. Break down that barrier by inviting or starting a conversation. If they want nothing to do with it and it's been okay, cool, move on to somebody else, because there's also behind the scenes God the Father who is drawing. Jesus could see that in Zacchaeus. Dude was literally up a tree pining to see Jesus. Okay, maybe the Father's at work in that guy. And that's where he went. He didn't talk to everybody in the town. But then when you're there, man, you just have this ability to like, hey, if you're doing life together with people over time, they'll just notice your faith will come through in all these just natural conversations about finances and the world and all this stuff, where they'll just be curious and they'll ask you about things. And in that space, maybe around your dinner table or at your house or at the hockey game at the arena, affords you to actually have deeper, nuanced conversations about really, really tough things like homosexuality and all those other things that are very polarizing and can be tricky to navigate. So again, I'm sorry, I'm rambling at this point. Forgive me if I'm preaching and you're listening to this, but even with our own actual neighbors, right? Yeah. We're trying to be us in Christ before them, and they naturally ask questions about it, and then we invite them along this journey, and it's an invitation. We're not forcing them, not coercing them, just like Jesus didn't do with anybody. He constantly gives that invitation. And some come and respond, and it's beautiful. Others don't. We keep ministering to them. We keep praying for them. And we hope they will come along at some point on the journey.
Yeah. Keep praying to see what God might do. Absolutely, man. Well, Aaron, this has been sweet, man. And I'm grateful for the fact that, you're doing what God's called you to do and doing it with real effectiveness and passion. And I know for people listening in, they're saying, man, we want to learn more about this guy. We'd love to learn more about Cornerstone Church in Henshaw. So where can they do that?
They can, it's interesting you guys say that. So like we're intentionally like, we don't have any social media, and we're intentionally off social media. And again, that's not a hate to people who are on the social medias and using it. It's a tool. It can absolutely be used for God's glory, and God bless you. It's just something that we're in our context. We're just trying to do everything relationally, trying to do everything face to face. Right. And I think word of mouth is way stronger than a scroll through on the screen. Right. And so when somebody comes to us, it's because they've actually been invited by a friend. Like, there's already an existing relationship there that then we can build upon. And that's been a big part of ours, to build on existing relationships that you have with people. Now let's just take them to a deeper level, or a more spiritual level. But obviously we have a website, cornerstonehensel.ca, so people can see, hey, where we meet on Sunday mornings and where we offer our different programs. Man, like, and if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I want to give to this. If you're feeling like, man, I want to give to something that is like actually impacting the kingdom of God right here in Ontario, right here in small town, which we absolutely have a passion for, because we would love to plant in future small towns, because there's all these little towns that I'm sure, like, if you drive through, you see like just empty church after empty church. And we'd love to see a new work of gospel plant in many other small towns around our area. So yeah, cornerstonehensel.ca, check it out.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thanks, brother. I'm grateful for this time, grateful for what you're doing, and grateful for what you've shared. So thank you.
You're welcome, man. And yeah, just pray that God can take all of these ramblings by his Spirit and use it for his kingdom and his glory.